Welcome to your second lesson on Hamlet, the first part. Today we'll be dealing with Act IV, and then in the second section we'll be finishing the play in Act V. I mentioned at the end of our last lesson that Hamlet told Gertrude not to betray him, not to tell Claudius that he is not mad, or in other words, to maintain the fiction that he is mad. And I mentioned that Gertrude had to make a decision. And we see her decision in this next scene, in the scene that opens this act. Claudius asks her, "How does Hamlet?" And she responds, "Mad as the sea and wind when both contend, which is the mightier." So she does decide, I will. You know, when she chooses to choose between her husband or her son, it really does seem like she chooses her son. And then she has to tell about Polonius's murder. In his lawless fit, behind the arras hearing something stir, whips out his rapier, cries, a rat, and in this brainish apprehension kills the unseen good old man." And Claudius quickly notes, "It had been so with us had we been there." He knows perfectly well that it could have been him. And Gertrude tries to mitigate this homicide almost right away. "Where is he gone? To draw apart the body he hath killed, or whom his very madness, like some ore among a mineral of metals base, shows itself pure. Weeps for what is done." He's crying that he's killed Polonius. She also says he's gone to draw apart the body he has killed. In your text, it suggests that to draw apart just means to pull it aside, but to draw apart could mean to cut it up in chunks. And in the source play, in fact, the Hamlet character does cut up the Polonius character and actually feeds him to the pigs. This is one way in which William Shakespeare's actually kind of toned it down a little bit. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are sent to ask Hamlet what he's done with the body, and he refuses to answer, merely suggesting to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern that they are sponges, and like sponges, they're likely to get squeezed. This is almost a warning if you think about it. When you get into a tank full of sharks, you can expect to become shark kibble, and that is, in fact, what is going to happen to them. Claudius is worried because he knows it's not just that Gertrude loves Hamlet, it's that he's very popular among the people. This is nothing we've been told before. Now we find out that he is. And that's something that concerns him very much. And he tries to question, where is the body? Hamlet starts to give him the kind of reply that leads into the sort of meditations on death that are going to continue through the rest of the play. "Now, Hamlet, where's Polonius? At supper? At supper where? Not where he eats, but where he isn't eaten. A certain convocation of politic worms are even at him. Your worm is your only emperor for diet. We fat all creatures else to fat us, and we fat ourselves for maggots. Your fat king and your lean beggar is but variable services. 2 dishes, but to 1 table. That's the end." And so all of this reference to maggots, and this is what I think of as, in the playground thing, the worms crawl in, the worms crawl out, the worms play pinochle on your snout. It's the same kind of thing. Hamlet also tells Claudius that Polonius is in heaven. "Send thither to see. If your messenger find him not there, seek him in the other place yourself. But if indeed you find him not within this month, you shall nose him as you go up the stairs into the lobby." On the one hand, he's in heaven, but his body seems to be in chunks under the stairs. Also, he has just told Claudius, in essence, that he can go to hell, quite literally. Hamlet says he'll go to England. He doesn't mind. And this is where we find out what Claudius is intending to have happen to him. He's going to send Rosencrantz and Guildenstern with an order to the King of England to have Hamlet executed. He suggests that Hamlet is like a fever in his blood, and he'll have to be bled in order to cure Claudius himself. Now, one of the questions is, why can the King of Denmark tell the King of England what to do? That's because at this period of history in which this is set, Denmark actually had control of England. It had to pay tribute to it. So this is why he can send Hamlet off to have him killed. Now, we heard a little bit about Fortinbras at the very beginning of this play. And by now, probably most of you have forgotten about him. That's perfectly understandable. And Fortinbras is one of the two people in this play who are in parallel situations to Hamlet. Fortinbras also lost his father. His uncle took over the throne, but his response has been to take it out in action. And Hamlet sees Fortinbras' army on the beach right before he takes off. He asks a captain, where are they going? And the captain says, we're going to get a little chunk of Poland. And Hamlet says, well, it must be worth a lot then. And the captain says, well, actually, no, it's not. I wouldn't pay to farm it. It's not really worth it, but it's going to be fought for. And this is something that impresses Hamlet a great deal, that all of these guys are willing to go and die for a little chunk of land. And you'd think he would say, what's the point? Why is this worth it? But to them, to Hamlet, it is worth it. It's for their honor. Hamlet also starts to reflect on the fact that while Fortinbras is a doer, he has himself done nothing. How all occasions do inform against me and spur my dull revenge. What is a man if his chief good and market of his time be but to sleep and feed, a beast no more? Well, how come I can't do anything? And he says, why am I still saying, this thing's to do, sith I have cause and will and strength and means to do it? Look at Fortinbras, he says. He's doing all these other things. And then he says, at this point, I'm going to dedicate myself entirely to my revenge. But of course, he's about to go to England, which is going to delay things a little bit. Now, Ophelia, when we last saw her, had just seen Hamlet, as she thought, completely crazy. And this is where I think we get to see the difference between real madness and Hamlet's feigned madness, because Ophelia comes in, and she comes in completely out of her mind. I mentioned also that one of the causes of melancholy can be despised love, one of the things Hamlet mentions in his to be or not to be soliloquy. And one of the things that Ophelia seems to be suffering from is green sickness, or chlorosis. That was a kind of madness that afflicted young, unmarried women, and the cure for it was to marry them off right away. That sort of got them healthy again. She wants to speak to Gertrude. Gertrude does not want to speak to her. And Horatio and a gentleman suggest to Gertrude it would be a good idea. Because even though what Ophelia says doesn't make sense, if you listen to her long enough, you can pick some kind of sense out of it. And as Horatio says, she may strew dangerous conjectures in ill-breeding minds. In other words, she's got, the stuff she's talking about as the kind of thing that could make people very suspicious about what's going on in Denmark's court, which is, as we've seen, not so good. Ophelia comes in with all of the different flowers later. She's singing. All of these different things are, in fact, suggestive of green sickness. And she's taking little clips of actual popular songs and stringing them all together. One of them is Walsingham, How Should I Your True Love Know, from another one, By His Cockle Hat and Staff and His Sandal Shoon. You can hear little clips of this on the web page associated with this lesson. And another thing that she sings is, white his shroud as the mountain snow, larded all with sweet flowers, which bewept to the ground did not go with true love showers. The original lyrics are, which bewept to the ground did go with true love showers. So she's changing it a little bit. What's she thinking about? Maybe her father. It's hard to know. And then she starts to sing the little St. Valentine's Day song, which is very suggestive indeed. Then up he rose and donned his clothes and up the chamber door, let in the maid that out a maid never departed more. By Gis and by St. Charity, alack and fie for shame, young men will do it if they come to it, by cock they are to blame. Quoth she, before you tumbled me, you promised me to wed. He answers, so would I ha' done by yonder sun, and that hadst thou not come to my bed. This is where a lot of people decide that Ophelia has actually slept with Hamlet, and they also are wondering why she's coming up with all of these obscenities. On the other hand, you have to remember both her father and Laertes warned her very explicitly about what would happen to her if she did sleep with Hamlet, so these ideas are already possibly embedded in her brain, whether she slept with Hamlet or not. And then she says something that really worries Claudius. I hope all will be well. We must be patient, but I cannot choose but weep to think they would lay him in the cold ground. My brother shall know of it, and so I thank you for my good counsel. Come, my coach. Good night, ladies. Good night. Sweet ladies, good night. Good night. And this is so much like Hamlet's Good Night, Mother, that I think we're going to hear a little echo of it. Claudius decides that it's because of her father's death. Just the way Polonius had decided that Hamlet's supposed lunacy was from lover's melancholy. And this is because this is something that Claudius wants to believe. Laertes comes back and he is ready to start a rebellion. In fact, he's willing to kill Claudius right there and then. He's really upset. I mentioned that Fortinbras is an obvious parallel to Hamlet. Laertes is another very obvious parallel to Hamlet. His father has been killed and he wants revenge. And unlike Hamlet, he doesn't even want to know the facts. He just wants to kill everybody. O thou vile king, give me my father! Calmly, good Laertes, that drop of blood that's calm proclaims me bastard, cries cuckold to my father, brands the harlot even here between the chaste unsmirched brows of my true mother. And Claudius actually says, let him go, Gertrude. So Gertrude's been holding him back. Where is my father? Dead, but not by him. Let him demand his fill. How came he dead? I'll not be juggled with. To hell allegiance, vows to the blackest devil, conscience and grace to the profoundest pit. I dare damnation. To this point I stand, that both the worlds I give to negligence. Let come what comes, only I'll be revenged most truly for my father. You couldn't get more unlike Hamlet, right? And Claudius says, would you like to know who killed your father first? And Laertes seems to calm down a little bit at that point. Unfortunately, this is the point when Ophelia comes back in, completely mad. This is not the kind of thing that's likely to calm Laertes down to discover that his sister is crazy in addition to his father being dead. Ophelia has a whole set of flowers, and she gives them out to different people. In your text, it says to Gertrude, to Claudius, but I should hasten to say this is the editor's assignation. You just have to guess which flowers go to whom. Nevertheless, there are specific significance. Rosemary, which she gives to Laertes, is for remembrance, and yet ironically, she can't remember her brother. She doesn't address him as her brother at all. The things that she gives to Claudius, fennel and columbines, if she gives them to him, are connected with ingratitude and they're connected with flattery. And she gives some rue to Gertrude. We know the word rue the day, you'll rue the day, regret. And so she says, wear some rue. Also, rue was a purifier, so those are the two reasons that she and Gertrude have them. And she goes off saying goodbye and also to beg mercy on all Christian souls. Laertes wants to know all about this. He wants to know why his father was not given a proper burial. And when Claudius gets to speak to him alone, he gets a chance to sort of implicate Hamlet, which, of course, as we know, Hamlet actually did kill Polonius. And Laertes wants to know, well, if Hamlet actually killed my father, why didn't you have him executed? It's a good question. And Claudius says there's two reasons. One is that, as we said before, he's loved of the distracted multitude. The crowd loves him. He can't just have Hamlet killed. But then there's another thing. The queen, his mother, lives almost by his looks. And for myself, my virtue or my plague, be it either which, she is so conjunctive to my life and soul that as the star moves not but in his sphere, I could not but by her. In other words, his mother loves him, and I love his mother, Gertrude, so much that I couldn't breathe without her. We'll get to see at the end of the play just how much Claudius really is willing to sacrifice to love Gertrude. What then proceeds is a lot of over-planning. Claudius comes up with the idea of staging an accident. There will be a fencing match. Laertes will fight Hamlet with a sword that does not have a button on it. In a fencing match, you'd normally have something to blunt the end of the sword, but there will be no button, and he will kill Hamlet accidentally. Laertes adds a little something to the mix. He says, I've got a poison, I'll put it on the sword, and so if I even just scratch him, he'll die. And Claudius adds yet another thing, saying, I'll add some poison in a cup. Now, poison, drunk poison, was often considered to be a really particularly cowardly way to murder somebody because your victim doesn't see it coming. And in the case of his own brother, his brother was asleep. So this is more of Claudius's snake-like character. All the over-planning is what will do them in. In fact, the fact that there's 2 or 3 or 4 different ways to kill Hamlet explains why we have so many bodies lying on the stage at the end of this play. Gertrude interrupts them to tell them that Ophelia has drowned. There's no clarity about whether it's an accident, it's suicide, or indeed possibly a murder, that somebody has pushed Ophelia in. And he has this long poetic description of her death. Ophelia has made more garlands, and she's gone near a willow, a weeping willow. The willow is a tree that's associated with disappointed lovers. We'll see that again in Othello, because it looks as though it's shedding tears. And she falls from the willow tree, falls or is pushed or jumps into the brook. Why she doesn't sink immediately is because her garments actually bear her up. It's trapped air underneath her dress, and she floats for a while, continuing to sing like a mermaid, and then through the magic of capillary action, her dress becomes soaked and she is dragged to muddy death, as Gertrude says. Now the question is, when she was floating like a marshmallow down the stream, why didn't somebody pull her out? And something we never really do get to find out. And Laertes is, of course, extremely distressed. Why is it indeed that Gertrude gets to report this? Because she reports this as a third-hand report or a second-hand report. She says she did not personally see it. So one of the things that you should know about this death of Ophelia, even though it happens off stage, the 19th century loved this and loved her mad scene. And there are several really excellent paintings of the death of Ophelia, one of the most famous of which is by John Millet. And there are links to that on the web page for today. Well, in our next lesson, or in the next section, we'll deal with the final bloodbath of this play, which we've seen planned. So just hang tight, and I'll get you the end of Hamlet in just a few minutes.